I'm delighted to welcome architect and Jayhawk Duncan Fulton back to the campus on Mount Aurea today for a conversation about his rock chalk journey of leadership. He is a 1977 graduate of our architecture program. Duncan is a co-founder, president, and CEO of Dallas-based GFF, a 120-person architecture firm, recently ranked the #1 business firm in the United States by Architect magazine. GFF is a multidisciplinary firm with completed work throughout the United States and in several other countries. Duncan's architectural work is diverse, with a recent emphasis on corporate and cultural projects. His corporate work includes Pizza Hut's world headquarters, Nokia America's headquarters, and Capital One's North Texas campus. He has worked for many of Dallas's most notable cultural institutions, including the Perot Museum of Nature and Science, the AT&T Performing Arts Center, the Dallas Zoo, and the Dallas Arboretum. He has served as president of both the Dallas AIA and the Dallas Architectural Foundation, and on the boards of the Texas Society of Architects. He also serves on the University of Kansas School of Architecture Planning and Design Advisory Board. Duncan, I'm pleased to welcome you to this conversation. I thought we can chat about your journey as a leader, to maybe learn more about what inspires you, what motivates you, how have your experiences shaped your journey as a leader, as an architect, and what role has KU played in shaping that journey. So if you could maybe just start chatting about your upbringing and what first brought you to KU.
Good. I'd be glad to do that, and it's always good to be in Lawrence and good to be on campus. My upbringing is fairly basic and fairly simple. I was born in Tennessee. My father worked for Napa Auto Parts. So we moved a couple of times, and I really grew up in St. Louis. And Dad's an interesting story. He kind of a classic greatest generation father. He began his career working behind the counter of an auto parts company, little auto parts shop in Louisville, Kentucky, and ended up being president of the company 30 or 40 years later. So I grew up in St. Louis and ended up at KU on the Missouri Reciprocity Program. And originally my plan was to go to Lawrence, get my degree, and I always thought I wanted to come back and work for HOK, but it didn't turn out quite that way.
It turned out even better.
Turned out even better, that's right.
So I understand that you went to Dallas. What took you to Dallas?
When, right after I graduated from high school, 2 days after I graduated from high school, my father was transferred to Dallas. And so I spent all my college summers there, and this was the mid-'70s. And Dallas was a very vibrant place. It was the time when the part of the country now known as the Sun Belt was getting noted as such. It was a time when the Rust Belt was getting noted as such. And so what I saw in Dallas was that there was just tremendous vibrancy. Concurrently, in the mid-'70s, there was a pretty significant real estate recession that affected the architectural profession. As we know, it tends to be boom bust along with economic cycles. And so I saw the two classes in front of me, very few of them actually be able to get into the profession. Meanwhile, the economy in the Midwest was not great. It was very strong in Dallas. And so I ultimately decided that Dallas would be a good place for a young architect to be. So in 1977, armed with my Bachelor of Environmental Design from Kansas, I moved down there full time after having just spent my summers there, and then spent a year enrolled in KU's work-study program, and at the end of that year had both a year experience and was awarded my Bachelor of Architecture from KU. And in that year, in that time, about a third of my graduating class, which was roughly 80, so probably 25 or 30 folks had moved to Dallas largely for the same reasons.
And 1982, I understand, is a very important year in your life and career. In what ways is that important year, and how did things shape up leading up to 82?
Well, 1982, at the beginning of 1982, I was a single guy living in a rented apartment with a nice job and rented furniture. At the end of 1982, I was married, had a firm, and all the responsibilities that go along with that. So I married my wife, Kay, then, and we married in September of 82, and that was about 4 months after we started Good Fulton and Farrell, GFF, now known as GFF, which was started in the spring of 1982.
Extraordinary. What motivated you to start your own firm?
Well, I think that I had always worked all through high school, all through college. During my college years, I started doing working for a home builder, doing house plans. I eventually began doing that on my own, and so I think I was always interested in having my own firm. And at the age of 26, two of the people I worked with the more we worked together, the more we realized that we had a common vision for the kind of firm we'd like to be in and the way we thought a firm ought to be run. And at the same time, we looked up and we were either designing, managing, or had brought in about half the work in the small firm we were in, and it was a very good firm. But we just thought it would be a good time to go out on our own, and we were young. I was 26. Larry Good, who is chairman of our firm, and we're still partners, was 31, and the original founding member, Stan Haas, was 30. And one of the things that I realized was that my life was never going to be getting simpler. I was never going to have less responsibilities. And if we were ever going to try that, 26 was a pretty good age to do it, because if it didn't work out, there was still a lot of life in front of you, and not as many people would be affected. So it just seemed like a good thing to do at the time.
What were the beginning years like when you started your firm?
One of the things that I think we really benefited from is because the three of us had worked together a lot, and we were basically part of the core of 6 that managed and ran that firm. Although my role was fairly was smaller than Larry's. Larry was a principal. Was that we'd spent a lot of time talking about the kind of firm, how a firm ought to run, and what was important to us. And out of that came some very, very clear ideas. At that point in time, there were, broadly speaking, 2 kinds of firms in Dallas. There were small, very, very design-oriented firms that was doing good work, but they weren't doing large city-shaping commissions. And then there were other very large firms that were doing the city-shaping commissions. If you're a young architect, you could go into them and you could have a wonderful career, but their design work was not the work that people were talking about. And our vision was real simple. It was to try and combine the best attributes of both. And so in the early days, although we had a very clear idea of what we wanted to do, as you can imagine, a bunch of people in their late 20s and early 30s are not getting city-shaping commissions.
Yes.
But those first 3 years, from 1982 to 1985, were a time of great, great growth. We went from 7 people to 30. Many of those folks are still with us today. Jeff Good, we hired during that time. He joined us. He is now a principal, also a KU grad.
Yeah.
So we probably have 6 or 8 people from that time with us. And our work was primarily small shopping centers. A real typical project for us would be a 15,000 square foot strip center out on the periphery of Dallas in the developing suburbs. And a big project for us might be a 25,000 square foot shopping center next to a grocery store, only we weren't doing the grocery store. So it was very modest, but it was very active. They were simple projects. They happened very quickly. And so we did a lot of work in a short period of time. And we were dealing with a building that was technically simple, which was a great match for us. And we were dealing with building owners who wanted their buildings to be visible. They wanted them to be seen, and so there were great design opportunities. And so very early on, we got a reputation for doing those, winning design awards, serving the clients well. And that really, again, that was shaped by that early vision.
So in a way, your design abilities were brought to bear on a growing city where obviously Dallas, as a spread out and sprawling metropolis, and particularly on the edges of it. So your firm played a big role in shaping up the design aspects of all of these growth.
Well, we played. I don't know if it's big, but we can see it, and it's notable. And I think as Dallas is, it's one of the most vibrant American cities right now because our economy is so vibrant. We've had some wonderful civic investments over the last 10 or 12 years. We've been fortunate to be involved in many of those. And I would say that the focus and attention has turned from the suburbs really to the health of the urban core. In the 70s, people were fleeing the core. In the 80s, people were migrating to the suburbs. And that migration, both people and companies, has reversed. There's now very much an in-migration. And one of the great things that's happening in Dallas right now is the level of interest in and fluency about urban design issues and what makes a great city has transferred and broadened from just designers and architects and planners to the average man and woman on the street. You regularly see letters to the editor about that in the Dallas Morning News. You regularly see op-eds about that. So the level of conversation, both in quantity and quality, about what makes a great city, how to keep our urban core vitalized and improving is it's all around you. It's just in the air, and that's really remarkable. And we've had a little bit to do with that, I'd like to think.
Yeah, now, Duncan, what strikes me is that you have identified opportunities that are probably more like seeds in a very large ocean of the city of Dallas. And those seeds have now grown and evolved. They have built your reputation, and you've continued to have an influence on the major cultural institutions of the city. How has that evolution occurred, or was there a jump at a time when you began to, when people began to see what you could bring to the city?
Well, we have always been, as a firm, one of our traits culturally is to be involved. Is to be involved in the life of the city. Not so that you get these opportunities, just because you need to engage, and we think that's beneficial. So I think that's happened progressively over time. We do a lot of nonprofit work and a lot of work for groups who need buildings really to help further their institutional mission, be that the Arboretum or be that a group like Camp John Mark, which we did a camp for in the late 80s for kids with severe chronic illnesses. And what I find is the type of people who are drawn to those initiatives have the give back gene. You don't ask to be a leader or on a building committee of an institution unless you're smart, you're a leader, and you're a giving person. And those are the kind of folks you can really, really build a firm around with meaningful opportunities. And they are also likely to go on and to maybe finish the assignments you first meet them on, and then they're asked by their church to be on their building committee, or they're asked by the mayor to be part of a commission. And I think we're benefiting generationally from the fact that many of us did that early in our career,
Yeah.
and our contemporaries are now leading a lot of those institutions.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to know them through many years of service.
Okay.
One great example of that is in the early 2000s, Dallas was a finalist for the Boeing headquarters and ultimately lost it to Chicago. And in getting the debrief, our city leaders were told that the reason we lost it to Chicago was because our downtown just didn't stack up. It wasn't vibrant, it wasn't interesting, there wasn't a lot going there. And I think Dallas leaders in general, those of us who live there, knew that. But now knowing that other people were noticing sort of flipped a switch. And so our mayor at the time, Mayor Laura Miller, created a inside the loop. Dallas is surrounded by freeway loops to really figure out how to fix it. And my partner Larry Good was asked to be the planning pencil for that group and to help codify the planning ideas, to help really be the planning resource for that group. And that has really that occurred in the early 2000s. In the intervening 10 years, many of those strategies, such as focusing on downtown parks, focusing on improving an advocacy group for downtown, have come to fruition. And so you can shape the world around you in many ways. Sometimes it's through initiatives, and sometimes it's through actual buildings.
Yeah, and I think you make an excellent point about how good design is essential at every scale, from a product to a building to the city scale, and that sensibility is what eventually, and in the long run, grows the business and the vitality of the city. And it's very heartening to see you and your firm have played a role in Dallas. From my Texas days, I do remember Dallas as a sprawling city and with not much of life in downtown, to today, where it is a very vibrant city with a lot going on for it. That is quite amazing. And stepping back to your days on campus here at KU, what were the things you remember that you carry with you from the education, from the people you met? What kind of influence have those had in shaping your career and your ideas about the world and your approach to design and practice?
Well, KU provided a very good education, and it was a balanced education. We had, when I was in school, you started studio the very first day, the very first semester, and you had a pretty full studio load. But it was also balanced with a variety of technical classes. And so we had, very early on, you were exposed to that balance that I think is so essential for architecture, in that there was a creative side, there was an artistic subjective side, and there was a more technical side. And I can tell you one of the things I remember most distinctly from my years at KU is my very best professors were always the professors, tended to be the professors, who had they spent 3 days a week at a practice in Kansas City, but then were finding time to teach. So they were the practicing architects. And that, I say that wasn't exclusively so, but that was something, a trend I saw. Another individual that was very influential on me was Professor Lou Michaels and his history of architecture class. And I'll never forget his history of architecture sequence. And I'll never forget that probably on the very first day, he told us, "You'll not be required to memorize a single date in any of my classes because there are many more important things that I have to teach you than memorization of dates." So it was a very rich experience, and it was a very balanced experience. And I think as I look out on the school today, that's continued. It manifests itself in different ways, but you've got programs like 804 that really balance what you learn in studio with what really needs to happen out in the real world, as they say.
And in what ways do you think the school has played a role as you evolved in your career and have now become a major firm with national recognition and reputation. What role has the school played or the university played in this kind of evolution till today?
Well, I think I'll answer that two ways. There's a personal answer, and the personal answer is it has given me a good foundation. But the firm answer is that we regularly see some of the very best students that come through our doors come from KU. We have a somewhat unique hiring program that's centered around an invited open house, where we have we close the firm down for an afternoon. We invite 25 to 30 about to graduate students who are about to graduate to come in, and they spend time with us, and a lot of our folks get to meet them. And then they're there for most of the afternoon. We're talking to them about us most of that time. Each of them do have a brief 20-minute interview, but most of it's really telling them about the firm. And then out of those interactions, we'll decide as a group whom to make offers to. We've been doing that program now for 6 years, and KU has by far, we've hired more graduates from KU out of that program than any other school. And we started this in the recession, and every year we've done this program, we've taken at least, we've extended an offer and had accepted, fortunately, to at least one KU student. There's no other school like that, and that's not because a number of us are graduates. That's because the students come out prepared. They come out with the characteristics that we seek, and others in the firm come to that conclusion, and they join us as a result. So it's we've got a strong contingent of Jayhawks, but it's because of the type of people they are and what they bring to the firm, not necessarily just the school ties.
Yeah, that is very important, perhaps, to realize that the school continues to produce leaders and very talented designers who are very grounded and also are very high conceptual thinkers, and they bring this breadth to the table. And it is also heartening to learn that they rise to the top through the rigorous process of hiring that you have, your firm has put in place. Let me just ask the question, what does Jayhawk mean to you?
Well, that's, for me, it's just some wonderful days in the late 70s that I spent on campus and in Lawrence. As a kid who grew up in the suburbs of largely St. Louis, to come to Lawrence, which had a vibrant downtown and literally a university on a hill, it was really just a wonderful experience. So, I think like many folks who are my age, you look back and you kind of have a fairly romanticized view of what your college years were like, but that's what it really means to me.
Well, also connected to that is a notion that you mentioned how different people have played a role in shaping your career and in mentoring you in particular. What do you see as the importance of mentorship in really carrying one through the career, guiding them, and making decisions at the forks in the road in life? Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I think that sometimes mentor is generally used singularly. People talk about having a mentor, and for me, it's probably been mentors. It's probably been different people at different stages of my life, and I would encourage people to think about that, to have multiple mentors, to seek multiple mentors, both because you need different things at different stages of your life, and you need people who can guide you in multiple areas. Not surprisingly, my father was a very, very important mentor to me, and he, because of his business career, because he stayed with one company his entire working life and rose through and saw that company at many levels. He had many, many different experiences that we found relevant. My co-founding partner, Larry Good, although he's just 5 years older than I, he was one step ahead of me almost at every stage of the career. So he has influenced me, particularly with regard to civic service, professional service, and things like that. We have, Kay and I have a couple at our church who has been very, very influential on us as mentors in our family life and spiritual life. So again, if you're going to have a rich and varied life, which I think everyone has, it's good to look for folks who can help be out there a little bit farther down the pathway with a flashlight showing you where the potholes are.
That's excellent to hear. Well, I think in a way, to sum up, what I'm so excited to hear about is how your time at KU and beyond has really brought into the world tremendous impact in terms of the design and transformation of cities, and in being able to cultivate leaders in the forum and beyond, in the city as well, to continue to mentor students and to play leadership role that helps us, that inspires us, and that guides us in many ways. So we are very excited to have you back on campus, and look forward to many more of these visits and an exciting future ahead.
Well, thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And Rock Chalk.